Hi Caroline, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Mike. How are you?
I'm not bad at all. I just wanted to start by apologising to people because it's been a few weeks since we did the last session, although there have been other videos, but it's the first Q&A for I think 3 weeks. That's just down to busyness. I don't need to tell anybody that we're all busy at the moment, especially Caroline. I also know, Caroline, that you've been getting out and about over the last week or so, and that you've been at ARI, Cornhill, Lawrence Kirk. I think you're just back from just now. You've dashed
Yeah,
up the
yeah,
road to do that. Um, and one of the perceptions, the reason I mentioned that is one of the things that people had mentioned to me was that you always did these from home,
yeah.
and that it didn't look like you were out and about with staff at the coalface, so to speak. Um, I thought it might be worth just asking you if you wanted to reflect on some of the things that you've heard over the last week from staff, and just how you use that to shape what you do as the chief executive.
Yeah, happy to do that, Mike. And also to note that although we're all really busy, folks have also been taking leave. So I think that's really important, just to say the importance of taking holidays, and sometimes that prevents things from us doing them as frequently as we'd like to. However, this remains a priority for me because of the feedback that I'm getting, Mike. So that's great. Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? That the perception being that I'm always doing these from home, and I am actually, because at the moment I find my working life being my home is really where I've got my office set up. But actually, most days last week I was out at particular sites. I was in Murray at Dr. Gray's on Monday, and as you say, I've just sprinted in the door from Lawrence Kirk, having spent the morning with general practice colleagues and the community team there, and some fantastic work. I was able to participate in their virtual ward, which has clearly made a huge difference. So I would say that I'm out and about, speaking to teams 2 or 3 times a week. Um, that's what keeps me sane. And actually, you asked how does that influence me as a chief executive. So really, that is my barometer in the system. So I can have really candid conversations and really hear from people who are experiencing difficult working environments, and just what's good for them, what's not working for them. It also allows me to sense check some of the things that I've been assured are happening, and whether they are or whether they're not, and what's got in the way of that. So yeah, it's really important for me to, as you know, to be present, and to be accessible. And I use all the intelligence that I get from that to make sure that I'm trying to stay really connected to people that are either delivering direct care or direct support services, to make sure that my feet are firmly planted in the reality of what our colleagues experience every day. So that's important. But yeah, I do these from home because I've now just about managed to get this desk set up, and know what I'm doing. And although I have been in Summerfield House, but I would imagine that's like most people trying to work between different areas, and it's difficult. Um, but yeah, that this is just the easiest place to do this specific piece of work. But I am running about in lots of different places all the time.
And in terms of the things you've heard maybe this week, because I know the pressure's been really acute across the whole system this week, is there anything in particular that staff have raised with you that you'd want to mention?
Um, I think there's a real recognition that the system that we had before COVID, particularly, so the pressures that we're experiencing across in every part of the system, so from our acute and specialist inpatient areas to our outpatient areas, to our community teams, to our social care and care homes, the pressure that is being experienced now is greater than it has been at any part of the pandemic. And that is also made worse by the number of colleagues that can't be at work because they have COVID or for other reasons. So it feels really difficult. And I think before, where some people thought we will be able to get back to some sort of normality that was the previous way of being, just a real recognition of that's not going to be the case. Moving forward, things have to be different and for the better. So there's some real optimism out there. And there is also a real sense of, and it's really interesting actually, when the sun is shining, people manage to be a bit more optimistic, and I know that's really hard. So yeah, I think the key things that I've heard just now is this feels impossible at times, yet still people come to work and they do the best they can, and that's what I'm seeing. And so on an individual level, just people trying their hardest, but a recognition really that the health and care system is doing what it was not designed to do, and we need to be thinking about how's that going to be different, better for the public, and really importantly better for colleagues that are working in it.
Thanks, Caroline. Well, we've only got a short amount of time today, and we've got quite a few questions to get through. What we're going to do just before I start, so people are aware, we're probably not going to get through all of the questions that have been submitted today because there's been a bit of a gap. So I think we've got another session booked in for next week, and we'll do the ones we don't get to today then. So I'll just crack on. And
don't make all the hard ones in this session then. Divvy them up a bit.
They're a mixture, I think.
Okay. Okay.
Before we start, I'll just give the usual caveat that obviously Caroline doesn't know the answers to everything, as I always say, but she will do her best to get you the answers that you need and facilitate that. So the first question, it's quite a timely one and something that none of us will have failed to notice, and that's concerning fuel costs. We've actually had at least half a dozen colleagues get in touch about this. Linda Stewart, who's community midwife manager, she's been in touch to point out that the impact the rising fuel costs are having on work expenses specifically, especially on her team as community midwives who obviously travel large distances in their duty. She basically has asked if there are any discussions that you're aware of to increase the current travel allowance as a result of the fuel hike.
Thanks, Mike. And yeah, it's significant, isn't it? I think everybody is feeling that, and of course, particularly our colleagues that we rely on to drive to deliver care it's going to have a big impact there. So Mike, no, I am not aware of, so I think there was a conversation nationally last week. I'm not aware of the output from it. Something in my mind says there was something in the brief maybe last week at some point, but we can check that. You might know that better than me.
Yeah, it was
but
Monday, I think.
Okay, what I can specifically do is ask Tom to give me a brief, because I think this is critically important. How do we support colleagues to do what they need to do their job, and the impact of that? And of course, we absolutely should be meeting those costs. So I don't know the detail, Mike. It will be a national decision. So we won't have the authority at a board level to increase mileage rates, etc. I am sure it will be a discussion. It's not one I've been part of, but I'll find out, and we can get an update specifically to the colleague that's asked that, but we can also make sure we're communicating that in the brief.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. This is kind of a follow-up from that. It's on a very similar note. Again, a couple of colleagues have been in touch about the annual mileage expenses cap of 3,500 miles. It was asked by the community mental health nursing team as a group, and also by Joanna Taylor, who's community children's nurse team lead. Just regarding that 3,500 mileage cap, they've asked if NHS Grampian are willing to consider given the geographical size of our area, particularly, whether we would consider scrapping that. Just for some background on this, one of the people who have emailed in mentions that the combined effect of the increase in fuel prices and the cap on miles means she only receives about 11 pence a mile that she does. And she said that it's having such an impact on some of her team that some of them are in fact considering their future in the profession. Would you be able to address that, Caroline?
Yeah, so I mean, that just is unacceptable. So I can address it from a point of, we have to have conditions that are fair, working conditions that are fair and contemporary, in that they meet the needs of colleagues who we are asking to do this work. I'm sorry, Mike, that I'm just not around the detail of that. But again, I will make sure that we get an understanding of where the local and national position is on that, so that I get that understanding. And certainly then I will understand where I need to have conversations in the Grampian system, or indeed with government colleagues, around what does this look like. We know that our health and care sector workforce is under incredible pressure, like many other sectors, and the least that we should be doing as employers is making sure that nobody is out of pocket, or definitely considering leaving because of the financial consequences of us asking them to do the care functions that we do. So no, let's get underneath that, Mike, and understand what's going on.
Yeah, and we're filming this a little more in advance than we normally do, so it might be that we could even get an update in the brief that goes along with this video when people see it. So
okay then.
So that might actually work quite well for people. So just to move on to the next question, it's actually come in and it's an anonymous one. They've basically asked, given the recent spike in COVID cases and the continued pressures across Grampian, are there any plans to extend Operation Iris beyond the 31st of March? Do you have any knowledge of that, Caroline? And maybe if you explain to anybody who doesn't know, although everybody should, maybe explain what Operation Iris is as well.
Yeah, so Operation Iris is simply the name that we gave to managing the increasing pressures over winter. And within that, obviously, we experienced the Omicron variant. So thankfully I can answer this, Mike. So at the executive team on Tuesday, which is my team meeting that I have every Tuesday, we discussed this very point because we were prepared to come out of Operation Iris on the 31st of March. It is very evident that we can't do that because of the current pressures that the colleague that's raised this has shared. And actually right now at the weekly system decision making group, that information is being discussed about how do we continue to manage and mitigate the risks of pressure in our system. So we've agreed we're not going to come out of Operation Iris on the 31st of March. We're going to review it on a weekly basis, and we will keep the measures and the objectives such as delivering critical services, maximising the well-being and safety of our colleagues, things like that, as our key focus. But yeah, we're not coming out of it on the 31st of March because the pressure in the system is too great.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. The next one is another anonymous question. The colleague asks, it's about the situation in Ukraine. They ask, in the face of the growing refugee crisis, what support are NHS Grampian prepared to provide to staff specifically who take in refugee women and children to their homes for what may be up to a year? She is quite specific that she means what support would NHS Grampian give as an employer to staff rather than to the refugees themselves. Is that something that you're aware of? It's maybe quite early on to know any detail on that.
Yeah, what an interesting question though. So firstly, Ukraine. who would have thought we would be where we are, and how difficult that is, and clearly for people in Ukraine, or now indeed not in Ukraine and not with their families, is just horrific. So yeah, I'm sure we've all been really thoughtful of that. So at the moment, most of my conversations have been about how are we going to support refugees and supporting citizens of Ukraine well in our area. But that question is brilliant, and I don't know the answer to it. So my suggestion is, what would good look like? So if people have, and I did have a real thought of, this is going to be really interesting to see how many of Scotland put their hands up to say we will support women and children from the Ukraine, and I'm really glad, not surprised, but really glad some of our colleagues have done that. And I don't know the answer to the question, but my starting point would be, what do you need? What does good look like? And let's go from there. So I think you said that was an anonymous.
Yeah, it was.
So I don't know if you know who they are, Mike. That's fine. But I would suggest that they email me or do it through you what good looks like, and let's understand it from there, because I think it's a really, really good, really good question.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll get in touch and make that offer with the person. Okay, so the next question is actually, again, it's anonymous from a clinical colleague. However, it's a bit of a reflection on your discussion with Jason Leach. I think it was last week or maybe the week before. In particular, the colleague says that they were really pleased to hear both of you reflect on how tokenistic gestures like care packages for staff are nice, but they don't help implement long-term cultural change. The person goes on to say that he was heartened to hear you talk about how simple things like being able to park close to work, finish on time, or take breaks are far more meaningful and important for staff well-being. In terms of a specific question, he goes on to ask what can be done to address the causes of those problems, like not finishing on time. He says, for him, highlighting the problem is a great start, but there was no discussion of an action plan on how best NHS Grampian can move forward with that. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, big question, isn't it? So I'm glad that landed well. And again, I have my thoughts on how we need to move this forward, so I'll share them. And we need to work with everybody in our system because we are what creates the culture, and so everybody needs to be part of this. So the work that Tom Power does around the culture collaboration, and certainly the work that we're going to do in the future around putting the workforce centre stage. That sounds like quite a strapline. It is, but it's to absolutely recognise that if our business is people. We don't produce a product. Our business is people working for and caring for people. So we have to invest in colleagues that are doing that, and I'm really, really clear on that. So how do I enable people to finish work on time? Let's use that as and take breaks. So finishing work on time and taking breaks as the example. I think we have an ingrained culture in the NHS that we have become dependent on, which is that we rely on the goodwill and everybody going the extra mile to allow our system to cope. And I think we've been there for a long time. And I think that COVID has just shone a light on, you'll have heard me say that before, shone a light on that. So do we have the right infrastructure, so people, resources, doing the right roles? So what do I mean by that? So probably something that's in the front of my brain is a piece of work that our Director of Nursing is doing, June Brown, around the administrative tasks that our senior charge nurses do. And actually our administrative colleagues could do that probably much better and much more efficiently than our clinicians. So how do we make sure we've got the right people working together in teams to do the right jobs? How do we create a culture of going above and beyond? Of course, is required on the odd occasion, but it's not how we build and design our system. And so there's something about the right infrastructure, then just that behaviour and that kind of expectation. It's a bit like there's an acceptance, isn't there? There's an acceptance that you'll get off late, or there's an acceptance that you won't get your breaks. And if I could be as bold as to say, Mike, and this might not go down particularly well, there's a bit of hero worshipping. Oh, she's a great doctor because she doesn't take breaks, or she doesn't, she's always here all hours. So there's something about, what do we reward colleagues for? And is it for working long hours, or not taking their breaks? Or is it for being the best people that they can be? So I think there's a big shift we need to make there as well. So getting the right people, doing the right roles, right number of people, doing the right roles, having that in our plans for how we deliver our services properly, and then at the same time having a real expectation that actually work and life balance is really important. You're not as effective at your work if you've not got that balance, and taking breaks is essential to doing people's work well. So really prioritising and actually making it uncomfortable if people aren't taking breaks, as opposed to, oh, you're fabulous because you didn't take your break, thanks very much. So yeah, lots going on. It is going to be a real focus over the next year, and different people will need different things to nudge them. And I'm sure lots of people will have their own ideas. And I know that the work that's being led through Tom, he will be desperately keen to understand what we need to do at an organisational level to make this better. And I need to know what people at an individual level also need help to do to prioritise taking breaks and leaving work on time. Can we come back to the parking one? That might just be too much for me in one question.
That's fine. It's fine. It's funny you say that, and it, believe it or not, as I usually say, I didn't say this time, Caroline hasn't seen these questions, but the next one is on the subject of car parking. Oh. So this question, again, it's anonymous, and I shouldn't joke actually, because it's a serious topic. It's probably not what you think I'm going to say when I mention car parking. This colleague has said that they have experienced a couple of occasions at Forester Hill recently where their car has either been damaged accidentally or potentially even done maliciously. What they were concerned about is, on both occasions, the areas where this happened weren't covered by CCTV, and they've asked if we would be willing to have a look into improving CCTV coverage for staff car parking. And they also mentioned that not just for the security of cars, it also helps the security of staff walking alone at night back to their cars as well.
So yeah, it's really serious. And firstly, I'm really sorry that when you've put in a hard day or night's work, you come out to find your car damaged. Particularly concerned if you believe that's malicious, and would strongly encourage you to either get in touch with me or your line manager to discuss that, because that is very, very worrying. Now, interestingly, CCTV, I had a conversation with Paul Allen, who's our Director of Facilities and E-Health, last week around this. And it was in relation to the recent health and safety inspection that we had on the Forester Hill campus. That was just last week. And really thinking about the safety of our colleagues. And that would be when you're in your work as well as when you're walking to and from, when you're on our premises. So that conversation is underway. I don't know where our CCT coverage is. I do know that Paul is linking with our local authority colleagues and the police around the wider CCTV opportunity. And so we could have a bit of an update on that. But for me, it's back to the mileage, it's back to taking your breaks. People should come to work and know that they are safe at their work. Now, I think we've got a huge piece of work to do there around just, again, that tolerance of particularly verbal aggression, But in relation to CCTV coverage and car parking, I don't know where we have that across the site. Let's understand that. And again, it should just be that is something that we have in place. Walking to and from your car and feeling vulnerable is not acceptable.
Thanks, Caroline. The next question is one that's, just let me double check. Yes, it is another anonymous one. She's mentioned that her friend was recently diagnosed with cancer as an outpatient at ARI. She asked if her husband could attend the appointment for support and was informed that he couldn't. She comments that this doesn't reflect NHS Grampian's values as an organisation, and asks if you can give any assurance that this shouldn't have happened and shouldn't happen again in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So gosh, horrendous, and it is not what any of us would want. I don't know the specifics of why that would be. It certainly doesn't fit with my understanding of where we have remained around visiting. And so now we had a conversation recently about support and loved ones being with people who were receiving chemotherapy, Mike, and I'm not sure if that was followed up with Yvonne or not, and if we got that. Yvonne also covers our outpatient services, so she would, this is Yvonne Wright, Chief Nurse, so she would definitely be able to give us an understanding. What I can say is I know that Yvonne and our outpatient teams are incredibly focused on making sure that loved ones can be with their relatives, so I'm not quite sure why that would have been or what's gone wrong in this occasion, and would encourage us to just double check with Yvonne anything that we need to do around that, and I'm really sorry that was their experience.
Thanks, Caroline. I think that was, we did get an answer on something from Yvonne on something very similar, as you say, so I'll have a look at that and see if it helps with this, but we can also follow up with her on this specific example. Okay, so as I said, we haven't got an awful lot of time today, so I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us again today. We will do another session next week, and we won't leave it 3 weeks this time. But thank you for your attention. What we also plan to do that I'd just like to flag up to people is in the next week or two, we will have a small survey in the brief, just designed to get your feedback on these sessions, the In Conversation videos. And it'd be really handy if people could fill them in. We see the views of the videos and they do seem to be popular, but both Caroline and I know, I'm sure there's ways we could make it work better for people. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so thank you, Caroline, and I know you've got various other things to do this afternoon, so I'll let you nip on, but thank you very much, everyone, again, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.